"Who are you fooling, Melania?" The voice boomed from the back of the room, cutting into the polished elegance of the gala. There was a collective gasp across the audience as the figure stepped forward, words cut sharp enough to dent the veneer of civility. "Charity. From someone like you? Spare us the spectacle." All eyes went to Melania Trump, standing stock-still on this stage, her expression unreadable. The grand ballroom hummed with conversation and clinking glasses. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the immaculately set tables, replete with white roses and gold-trimmed name cards. A high-profile charity gala for underprivileged children, it had attracted a guest list made from some of the cream of politics, celebrities, and business magnates. Yet beneath the surface, simmering tensions abounded. The keynote speaker of the evening was Melania Trump, and she was the focus. Dressed in an ivory-colored gown, she acted with poise while awaiting her cue. The whispers began well in advance. The activists had vowed to make their presence felt and call her out for hypocrisy, using philanthropy as a cover for privilege. Security was at a high stage of alert, peering across the room, searching for trouble. With a newly composed facial expression, Melania stood up, walked towards the podium, and changed the course of the night instantly. Chatter died down to almost nil and became very subdued. Clicking her heels against the marble floor, with measured, intentional steps, she strode across to take the stage. She reached it, adjusted the microphone, her eyes scanning round. "Ladies and gentlemen," she started, her voice smooth as silk but commanding, "let me begin by saying, thank you for joining us tonight in support of a cause dear to my heart." Before she could proceed, there was an interruption. "Hypocrite!" The word echoed, and the room was frozen. Heads turned to the back of the room, where a number of activists stood. One of them was a man in his 30s, who with determination in his eyes pointed directly at Melania. "You've lived a life of luxury while millions suffer. What do you know about hardship? About charity?" The room erupted into chaos. Some audience members yelled for the activists to leave, others said nothing, looking back and forth between the stage and the ruckus. Security personnel began moving toward the crowd, but Melania raised her hand to stop them. "Let them speak," she said, her voice even. And then, stunned silence fell in the room. The lead activist smirked, emboldened by her response. "You're a symbol of everything that's wrong with this country. Privilege, power, and indifference. Tonight, we're here to expose the truth." Melania took a step forward, her gaze locked on the man. "You've made your point," she said, her voice unwavering. "Now allow me to make mine." Heavy with implication, her words hung in the air, before an activist-filled audience, in one of those watchful moods, ready to make a response from her that was unprepared by anybody. "You think to silence us?" boomed out the voice of the leading activist, clear and relentless. "Not tonight. Not ever." And with that, the group surged forward, up towards the stage, as their resolve cut through the shocked murmurs of the crowd. Cameras flashed at the unfolding chaos of an elegant charity gala disintegrating into turmoil. What was once a haven of wealth and grace now resembled a powder keg of a ballroom. Security moved quickly. Radios crackled with urgent orders as 5 activists in a loose formation neared the middle of the room while their voices rose above the din. "This isn't about your carefully crafted image," the man in the lead declared, pointing directly at Melania Trump. "It's about accountability. You've hidden behind a veil of privilege for too long." Melania, still standing at the podium, didn't bat an eye. Her calm, composed demeanor was at odds with the chaos unfolding around her. The crowd's reaction was split. Some whispered anxiously, glancing toward the exits, while others pulled out their phones, ready to record the moment. "Enough!" A commanding voice from the audience cut through the din. It belonged to a prominent businessman, his face flushed with anger. "You're ruining an evening meant for charity. Have some decency." The activists didn't waver. "Decency?" the leader shot back. "Decency is helping those in need, not parading around in designer gowns pretending to care." As the argument grew more heated, Melania raised her hand again, this time for silence. Miraculously, the room obliged. She stepped away from the podium, her heels clicking against the stage floor, and moved closer to the edge. "I hear your anger," she said, her voice steady yet commanding. "But tonight is not about me. It is about the children who depend on the generosity of everyone in this room." The activists looked at each other, a little taken aback by her response. "Words are easy," replied the leader after regaining his composure. "It's the actions that talk. What have you done?" Melania stopped and let the question hang in the air. The silence after that was deafening. Then, with a slight nod, she indicated the side of the stage. A young woman came out, her gait hesitant but determined. The crowd turned to watch her climb the stairs and stand next to Melania. "Meet Maria," Melania said, her voice modulating to a quiet determination. "Her story is one of many. Tonight I will let her actions speak louder than my words." The activist leader frowned, his defiance faltering for a moment as Maria took the microphone. "My name is Maria," she began, her voice quivering, but with strength building with each word. "And I am here today because of the support I received when I had no one else to turn to." The room hushed, the chaos from a minute before replaced by an expectant unease. All eyes were on Maria as she started to tell her story, one that would change the course of the night, and the conversation about it, for good. "You're all talk, Melania. Prove it!" The words cut through the air, sharp and accusing, as the activist's challenge echoed in the ballroom. The crowd froze, all eyes fixed on the First Lady. Would she falter under the weight of the moment, or rise to it? Melania Trump stood at the very edge of that stage, composed. The air was thick, the disruption earlier in this very hall too fresh in the minds. The lead activist had thrown that challenge like one of those dare you things no one imagines she'd take. She said nothing for a moment. The silence stretched, thick with anticipation. Then, she leaned slightly forward, her voice calm but with a sharp edge. "You say actions speak louder than words. Let's talk about actions." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Even the activists appeared to have been caught off guard by her aplomb. Melania gestured toward a side door, whereupon a phalanx of event staff wheeled in a small display board covered in photographs and documents. "For years," she began, her voice firm, "I have supported initiatives to help children, victims of abuse, and families in need. Quietly, without fanfare. Not because I wanted recognition, but because it was the right thing to do." The display was placed center stage. On it were pictures of smiling children in classrooms, families holding care packages, and community centers bearing her foundation's name. She turned to the lead activist, her gaze piercing. "You say I've done nothing," she continued, her tone never rising. "You've demanded proof. Here it is." The confidence that had earlier exuded from his being now stumbled in the activist. The hum of the crowd grew noisier, with people leaning forward and peering on to scan images and documents put on the board. "But that is not all," Melania advanced to the podium. "Tonight you will hear of people whose lives have been changed. Not by promises, but by actions." A ripple of surprise ran through the room as she gestured once more to the side of the stage. A young man stepped forward, his shoulders square but his hands shaking. He took the microphone. His voice was hardly above a whisper. "My name is Kevin," he began, "and I owe my education to the scholarship fund Mrs. Trump created. Without it, I would not have had the opportunity." The audience was silent again, fascinated by his words. Kevin's story was one of overcoming and redemption, a journey that wouldn't have been possible without the anonymous support Melania had provided. As he finished speaking, the crowd erupted in applause. The activists exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier bravado now replaced with visible discomfort. Melania stepped forward again, her voice cutting through the applause. "This is just one story. Tonight there will be more." The tension in the room shifted, the narrative no longer dominated by the accusations but by the undeniable impact of her actions. And as the next guests prepared to take the stage, it was clear, the balance of power had begun to shift. Is this another staged act? This was an accusation cut through the clapping from the rear of the room like a hot knife. How opportune that these stories come up now. Hoots and murmurs continued and the tension flared once more. Was this another desperate attempt to discredit Melania Trump, or did the critics have a point? The silent ballroom was a held breath of anticipation. On stage, the young woman named Maria clutched the microphone, her hands shaking slightly. She looked at Melania, who nodded reassuringly. "I'm not here because anyone asked me to be," Maria began, her voice soft but steady. "I'm here because I want you to know the truth." The crowd leaned in, enthralled despite residual doubt. And then Maria's story began to unfold, a harrowing tale of survival, resilience, and an unexpected lifeline. "I was 20 years old when I escaped," she said, her eyes welling up with tears. "My home was not safe. My family turned their backs on me, and I had nowhere to go. That's when I found the shelter funded by Mrs. Trump's foundation." The room fell silent, the murmurs heard earlier replaced by a deafening silence. Maria's voice started to break as she continued, "They gave me a place to sleep, food to eat, and counseling to help heal. For the first time in years, I felt safe." As she spoke, images from her journey appeared on the screen behind her, pictures of the shelter, of the volunteers, of Maria herself, smiling with cautious hope. And the crowd in the room visibly had their emotions change, their doubt now laced with a little bit of sympathy. But the tension did not entirely dissipate. The leader of the activists, seated in the back, leaned forward and spoke in hushed tones to his cohorts. The faces of the men said it all, from skepticism to discomfort. It was obvious that they had not expected this much honesty. Maria concluded her story with a quivering smile. "I don't know where I would be without the support I received. Tonight, I stand here to say thank you." The audience erupted in applause, washing over the room in a tide of feeling. But the activist leader didn't bat an eye. He stood to his feet, his voice slicing through the applause. "One story doesn't erase years of privilege. What about everyone else? What about those who didn't get help?" The room tensed again, the applause falling to uneasy murmurs. Maria looked to Melania, unsure of how to respond. But Melania stepped forward, commanding presence. "You're right," she said, addressing the critic directly. "One story isn't enough. That's why we have more." With a wave of her hand, she invited another guest onto the stage. A man in his 40s, dressed modestly but with the aura of quiet dignity about him, came forward. The crowd's attention shifted, curiosity replacing doubt. "Meet Jacob," Melania said, her voice low but firm. "He will tell you what actions mean." As Jacob took the microphone, the room once again fell silent, the suspense building for what was to come next. More artfully contrived sob stories? The voice of the activist leader was laced with contempt as he took to the center of the room, applause cutting like a knife. "When are you going to stop hiding behind other people and own up to it yourself?" The room once again teetered on chaos as the attention of the crowd shifted. Finally, would the calm of Melania Trump crack? Melania Trump's face didn't move. The second speaker, Jacob, as he took up the microphone after him, nothing in his hands shook, nor did his frame flinch. He stood firm in contrast to the activist's tirade, so much so that it piqued everyone's expectations. "My name is Jacob," he started saying in this deep voice, and immediately commanded the attention of his audience. "I am not here to defend anyone. I am here to tell the truth." The crowd leaned in, enthralled. Even the activists exchanged uneasy glances, sensing that Jacob's story was not something they could easily dismiss. Jacob's tale was one of perseverance and redemption. A one-time single father struggling to make ends meet on 3 jobs, he had faced homelessness after a string of unfortunate events. "I was at my lowest point," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I didn't know how I would feed my daughter, let alone keep a roof over our heads." The audience hung on his every word. Jacob explained how an unsolicited grant from a charity organization funded anonymously gave him the lifeline he needed to rebuild his life. He detailed how that financial support allowed him to secure stable housing, return to school, and eventually start his own business. "It wasn't until later that I learned who had funded that organization," he said, turning toward Melania. It was her. There was a hum of surprise throughout the room. Jacob was truly thankful. His voice, even as he closed, she didn't seek recognition. She didn't use it to headline. She just helped. And because of that, my daughter and I have a future. And it got louder this time, rounder and heartfelt. But he would just not budge. The consummate activist leader took again to the center, this time his tone incisive and cutting. One-off acts of charity don't erase systemic privilege, he finally said, daring with a challenge in his eyes. How many other Jacobs are there out there? How many have been left behind? The applause faltered and turned into murmurs of uncertainty. Melania stepped forward, her movements deliberate, her voice calm yet resolute. You ask how many were left behind? She said, meeting his gaze. Too many. That is why I am here tonight. Not to defend myself, but to continue making a difference. Her words were low, but laced with underlying power that silenced all murmurs. She gestured to the wings of the stage. A video droned on over the large screen behind her, showing scenes of community centers, schools, and asylums, all given life through nameless donations from her pocket. This isn't about me, she said, turning to the audience. It is about what we can achieve together. Tonight is not the end of this conversation. It's only the beginning. The crowd erupted into applause once more, the earlier tension replaced by a growing sense of unity. The activist leader hesitated, his arguments losing their weight in the face of overwhelming evidence. The tide had turned as the applause grew louder,